Yeah.
Now, talking about working together, you know, what's the relationship between the glute and the hip flexors? Like hip flexors for me is really the Achilles heel of cyclists. You know, we're in this awful position.
Yep.
You know, like at least runners get the opportunity to stretch it out when they're, you know, the hip flexor joint.
Yep.
They get to stretch it out when they're striding, so so the hip flexor is being stretched out. But cyclists are on the bike in this sort of compressed moment where the hip flexors are just sort of going, you know, the upper legs going like that, and their body's just sitting on top of it trying to stabilise it. So, you know, you're in this position where you just really shortened
the whole time.
Yeah. So the relationship between the hip flexor. Now, my understanding is that the hip flexor and the glute work together. So if you've got a weak hip flexor, then your glute's going to be, you can't get as much power out of your glute, which is the biggest muscle in your body.
Yep.
Yeah. So what's the new take on that now? Is there any further developments on what's happening with, you know, with that sort of theory around the glute and hip flexor movement?
Look, they do work together. They will not only create what we call global movement, which is big movement.
Yep.
But they will also dynamically stabilise that hip joint at the same time.
Right, okay.
They work in synergy. We used to think that one muscle does this and the opposite, the antagonist, will do that.
Yep.
Now, again, that's looking at the body in a single plane motion, segmented overview of what things did. Okay. Again, it's not just as simple as looking at the hip. Like, we do need to look at it. Okay, but we also got to consider the other factors. What does the ankle do? Because the ankle can shut down the hip flexors just as much as the glutes.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Wow.
And they can also, if the ankle switches off again, can also switch the glutes off.
Really?
So, yeah.
Wow.
So if that ankle, that ankle
it's only a little joint.
It's a big joint.
It's a big
There's
joint.
There's a lot of movement there. Like, when I say ankle, I do include the foot complex.
Right, okay.
There's 33 bones in there. There's something like 2,000 proprioceptors there.
Right, okay.
It's almost as many as your tongue's got.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of proprioceptors, and we need proprioception.
Yep.
Okay. If it shuts down, and there are lots of joints in there which will shut down, all right, then whatever the small motion you lose,
little motion down there.
Little motion down there is big motion up top.
Right, okay. Yep.
Do you understand?
Yep.
Okay, so if we lose the ability of that ankle to pronate, which is roll in
over,
and go through sort of lateral movement as well, the glutes won't work.
Right.
Okay? The glutes require that motion down there to switch them on.
Right.
It's a reaction. It's just think of the body as a chain reaction.
Yep. Okay.
What happens down on the pedal for a cyclist in that shoe is just as important as what happens up in the hip.
Right. Amazing.
All right. So if we can create, and this is why, and I know we'll talk a little bit later about it, we introduce mobilizers.
Yep. Sure.
Okay. Those mobilizers were designed to facilitate the right motions in the foot-ankle complex.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Now we've got a whole range of mobilizers on the DVD, haven't we?
We do have a huge range.
Huge range.
And there's millions more out there.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So by looking after the foot and the ankle, okay, we will help facilitate better lengthening and loading, which is sort of, I suppose we'll call it activation of muscles, subconscious activation of muscles in that hip complex.
Sure.
Okay, now cycling, yes, it does spend a lot of time in flexion.
Yep,
okay,
which, so that's where your hips are,
they're closed in.
Yeah, closed in. Yep.
Okay, and that's the required element of the sport.
Yep.
Okay, unfortunately, long term, that just means that whole anterior hip complex, not just the hip flexors, okay, adductors, quads, and a couple of other muscle groups as well. They will, over a period of time, get shorter. The connective tissue will start to bunch up and get taut, or not taut, but shorter, and not allow the muscle complex to open up.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. We need to be able to get some form or some level of extensibility, so extension through that tissue, for that hip flexor to open up, so that the glutes can then work and do what they need to do as well.